All right, let's jump right in. You've got a patient who just had a root canal, but there's almost no tooth to work with. It's one of the biggest challenges in restorative dentistry. The long-term survival of that tooth really hangs on the choices we make next. So today, we are going to unpack the evidence for one of the most critical decisions in this whole process: which post to choose. I mean, this is the reality we face at the chair. The endo is perfect, but the crown is a mess. So the question isn't just about filling a space, it's about building a solid foundation that can handle years and years of chewing. If you get it right, that tooth has a long life ahead. But if you get it wrong, you're looking at a catastrophic failure. So what does the evidence tell us to do? So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll quickly define the real problem and what a post is actually for. Then we'll get into the two competing philosophies of restoration. After that, we'll dive straight into a head-to-head showdown based on a huge systematic review. That's going to lead us right to the core clinical trade-off we all face, and then we'll wrap it up with a clear, evidence-based path for making the right call. Okay, first things first, let's clear up a really common misconception. A post does not strengthen a tooth. Its main job, its only job really, is retention. When you just don't have enough tooth structure left for your core buildup to grab onto, the post acts as an anchor down inside the root canal. It's all about making sure that core and the crown on top of it don't go anywhere. So, okay, we know we need a post for retention. The obvious next question is, which one? But, as we're about to see, choosing between different types of posts isn't just about picking a material. It's really about buying into one of two completely different philosophies about how a tooth should be restored. And this brings us right to the main event, the rigid approach versus the flexible approach. For years, the whole game was dominated by super rigid metal posts. But then, fiber-reinforced posts came along and just threw a wrench in everything, proposing a totally new way to handle all the stress that goes through a root. So on one side, you've got the old-school, rigid philosophy with metal posts. They're incredibly stiff, which is fantastic for retention, but it means they tend to concentrate all the biting forces in one place, usually right at the tip. Then on the other side, you've got the flexible philosophy of fiber posts. Their whole goal is to mimic the natural flex of dentin, to spread out the stress more evenly, and let the whole system, the tooth, the post, the core, all work together as one. Now, the science behind these two ideas all comes down to a property called the elastic modulus. That's just a fancy term for stiffness. The entire argument for fiber posts really hinges on this one concept. If you can use a material that has a stiffness a lot like dentin, it's going to flex with the tooth when the patient bites down instead of fighting against it. And this quote from a 2025 review by Gyak and colleagues just nails the risk of that rigid approach. Because metal is so much stiffer than the tooth, it creates these dangerous stress hotspots. They call it a wedge effect, which is a perfect description. It's literally like driving a tiny metal wedge deeper into the root every single time the patient chews. So we have these two competing theories, but what does the actual clinical evidence say when you put them side by side? Let's get to our head-to-head showdown and see what this huge network meta-analysis, which looked at 25 different trials, actually found. We have to start with the most important question. A crown that comes off can usually be fixed, but a root fracture? That's almost always game over for the tooth. So, which system is better at preventing that absolute catastrophe? And the answer from the data is a fiber post reduces the risk of tooth fracture by a staggering 85% compared to not using a post. Meanwhile, when they looked at metal posts, they found no significant benefit in preventing fractures. And here's the why straight from the researchers. It comes right back to that key concept we were talking about, the elastic modulus. Because fiber posts have a stiffness that's so similar to dentin, they absorb and distribute those chewing forces in harmony with the tooth, which protects it from the kind of peak stresses that lead to cracks and fractures. Okay, so fiber posts are the clear winner on fracture resistance, hands down. But that is only half the battle. Remember, the whole reason we're using a post is for retention. So, which post is actually better at staying put? And here is where the story completely flips. The very same study found that when it comes to preventing debonding, the restoration coming loose, metal posts consistently perform better than fiber posts. This basically confirms what clinicians have thought for a long time. Metal posts have fantastic retention. So, why the difference? Well, it's all about how they hold on. Metal posts rely on physical mechanical features. Think of things like rough surfaces and little serrations that the cement can physically lock into. It's like a key in a lock. Fiber posts, on the other hand, they rely on a more delicate chemical and micromechanical bond. And the evidence just seems to show that the simple physical lock is more reliable over time. Okay, so now we have the whole story. And what it presents us with is a really clear clinical trade off. We have to make a choice, weighing the risk of one type of failure against the risk of another. With a metal post, your main benefit is that awesome retention, but your biggest risk is a catastrophic tooth fracture that you just can't fix. With the fiber post, your main benefit is preserving the tooth and preventing fracture, but your biggest risk is that the post might come loose, which is a failure that is often, but not always, fixable. At the end of the day, this is the choice you're making. Are you going to prioritize the survival of the restoration itself, or are you going to prioritize the survival of the tooth? Because the evidence is pretty clear that it's tough to maximize both with just one material, and that choice requires a real clinical philosophy. So, how in the world do we navigate this trade-off when we're with a patient? Let's build all this evidence into an actionable decision pathway that you can actually use. Here's a logical way to think it through. Step 1, prioritize the long-term survival of the tooth over the restoration. A lost crown can be remade. A fractured root is an extraction. That leads you right to step 2. Choose a post that minimizes that fracture risk by mimicking dentin. Then, in step 3, you can start to think about the other issues, like debonding. Step 4 is just putting it all together to find the best overall compromise. And when the authors of this massive review did just that, they came to this very clear conclusion. After weighing everything, fractured risk, debonding risk, even the risk of new cavities, they recommend prefabricated glass fiber posts as the best all-around choice for balancing these competing factors. So let's just quickly recap the big points. The choice of a post is a trade-off between breaking the tooth and the posts coming loose. Fiber posts are way better at preventing catastrophic fractures. Metal posts are better at staying put. But when you look at all the evidence combined, prefabricated glass fiber posts come out on top as the best overall choice for your patients.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This whole conflict has always been about rigidity for retention versus flexibility for preserving the tooth. Moving from metal to fiber was a huge leap toward prioritizing the tooth. So the question for the future is, can materials science finally close that gap? Can we engineer a hybrid post that gives us the unshakable retention of metal with the kind, gentle flexibility of fiber? Now that is the next frontier.